at today's notes. If you understood what I just did for that quiz practice, you're going to understand today's notes. Shh. I am very confused. Am I trying to talk or are you guys trying to talk? Okay, so now we have a new inverse operation we're going to talk about. If you have something like x squared, that's a square. The opposite of a square is a square root. So when you square something, the opposite is a square root. And notice how the arrow goes both directions? So the opposite of a square root will be a square. So squares and square roots undo each other, just like multiplication and division undo each other. Let's check out our steps. Our steps say locate the variable. Then it says isolate if it has a square. So we're going to do everything first before we deal with the square. Now, remember, PEMDAS goes parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. When we are solving for a variable, we go the opposite direction. Parentheses go last. Squares go last. So everything we've done before happens before we deal with the square. So you're going to get x squared all by itself before you do anything else. Then you're going to take the square root of both sides. And then we can check our solution by plugging it in. All right, so for the first problem, what's the opposite of x squared? How do I undo x squared?
You gotta remove
I take the square root. And we're going to take the square root of both sides. That means that square is going to cancel out with the square root. And x equals the square root of 36, which is? It is 6. Yeah. How do we do 5? We'll get to that, okay? We hit that second x squared button, and then the 36. This might be one we should know, because 6 times 6 is 36. That's a pretty easy one just to know that the square root of 36 is 6. I want you to quickly do 2, 3, and 4. And then we can get to 5. We'll do the remaining one. Number 2, we should have realized that we were taking the square root of both sides. And you should have came up with 17 equals y. Okay, good. Now, can we all take a pause for a second? Can we all take a pause and look up here? Both of my answers are actually wrong. That's okay. We don't have to do much.
For number 1 and 2?
For 1 and 2, both my answers are wrong. But I let you guys go because we have to remember something when we take the square root of something.
Oh, check it.
Well, check it would be one thing. So what's 6 times 6? What's 6 squared? 36. Does it work?
Yes.
Yeah, but let's think about something else.
Oh, there's the exponent.
So 6 times 6 is?
12, but that's not.
No, 6 times 6.
Oh, 36.
36. So it works. It works. That's not what's wrong with this. What's a negative times a negative?
A positive.
What's negative 6 times negative 6? Would negative 6 work here? Type in your calculator right now. Make sure you use parentheses. Type in negative 6 squared. Make sure you use parentheses. What's with parentheses negative 6 squared? Does negative 6 work? Yes. Whenever you take the square root of something, you actually introduce 2 possible answers. A positive version and a negative version. So although x equals 6 is part of the answer, When you take the square root, your answer is actually x equals positive or negative 6. And that's how we say I have a positive and a negative 6. This gives both of my answers. This is both x equals 6 and x equals negative 6. That happens anytime. Malia, make sure we're paying attention to this. Did we write it down? Okay.
Plus minus.
We have to write plus minus in front of our answer. So when we're taking square roots, we have to write plus minus because when you square a negative, it becomes a positive. So is this y equals 17? No, it should be y equals plus or minus 17. Because 17 squared is 289, and negative 17 squared is a positive 289. Now, for those of us that went ahead, is it that hard to put plus or minuses on them? No. Okay. So let's go through the rest of the ones that I asked you to do.
I did number 7.
We'll get to it. So we're going to take the square root of both of those. For number 3, what does m equal? Hey, let's lift up our pencils.
11.
Lift up all our pencils. Put them down. Look up here. Pencils down. So I want us to finish this as a class. M equals what for number 3?
11.
Positive and negative 11. There we go. Now I'm going to take the square root of both sides here. I didn't tell you to put your pencils back down. If I need to collect your pencils, I will. We're doing this together. Unless you're changing something.
Yeah, just change it.
Okay. All right. What's the square root of 400?
20.
20. So is it k equals 20?
No. K equals plus negative.
K equals plus or minus 20. Perfect. Hey, for those of us that tried in our calculator, what happens when you take the square root of 0?
0.
Because what's 0 times 0?
0.
0. So the square root of 0 is 0. So when I did number 5 and I took the square root of both sides, I should have a equals 0. Now 0 doesn't have a plus or minus. 0 is just 0. It's not plus, it's not minus. Remember, plus or minus just tells you which direction to go away from 0. Well, 0 is already at 0, so there's no plus or minus. It's just a equals 0. Okay, 6, we're going to take the square root of both sides. What's the square root of 196?
14.
14. Is our answer just r equals 14?
No.
Plus and minus 14? All right, now let's get to 7 and 8. Because 7 and 8, we introduce a new thing. Now, I told you in the directions, it says isolate your variable squared first. The very last thing you do is you're going to take the square root of both sides. That's the very last thing. You will do addition, subtraction. You will do multiplication, division first. So we're going to notice that we have a minus 10 and a square. We have to deal with the minus 10 first. So we need to add 10 to both sides first. Yeah, the very last thing we're going to do is we're going to take the square root. Now we have x squared equals 49. Is my x squared all by itself now? Yes, I isolated it. Now to get rid of x squared, we take the square root of both sides. And we have x equals not just 7, but plus and minus 7. What's the first thing I do in number 8? I cross out the 24, but I need something underneath it to cross it out. What do I cross it out with? A negative 24. So we're going to subtract 24 on both sides. We subtract both sides by 24. That means our 24 and negative 24 cross out like Campbell said. And we have m squared equals, looks like 9. Plus or minus 3, right? Because when I take the square root of both sides, I'm going to have m equals plus or minus 3. Not that bad at all. Let's keep going. We're going to do 2 more together. Maybe we'll do 3 more together. I don't think any of them are decimals, but we will do 9 and 10, and then we'll do a couple from the bottom, okay? Shh. we have to do it by a negative. Like, which one are you looking at? So we'll multiply by a -2 on both sides. Go. All right. Let's go ahead and do 9 and 10 together. What comes first, multiplication or squaring when we're undoing stuff?
Oh, no, multiplication.
When we're undoing it, we do multiplication first. So what's my first step on number 9? What's my first step on number 9? Times 3. So the opposite of multiplying by 3 is going to be? Divide by 3. So we're going to divide both sides by 3. Because then my 3's cancel out, but what I do to one side, I do to the other side. What's 192 divided by 3? 64 equals... Because now we're going to take the square root, but we need to have that 64 step in there, right? So now we take the square root of both sides. And we're going to have plus or minus 8 equals W, or W equals plus or minus 8. Okay, number 10. Number 10. Remember, we isolate the k squared first. What's on this side that's not k squared? A -5. How's a -5 attached to the k squared? Division. What's the opposite of division? What's the opposite of division? Sorry, I can't see. Really. Multiplication. Now remember, when you multiply or divide, you multiply by exactly the same number. So I'm going to multiply by a -5. We're going to multiply both sides by a -5. So I'm going to multiply this side by a -5. So that my -5's cancel out. And I multiply this side by -5. And we should have k squared equals a positive 100, right? How do I undo a square? Square root it. So we'll take the square root of both sides. What was that? I haven't done it yet. It's only when you do the square root that we add the plus or minus. So what's the square root of 100? It should be 10, but we should have k equals plus or minus 10. So Malia, that's one of the reasons why we got to wait till the end to take the square root to add the plus or minus. Otherwise, we're going to get screwed up. So the last step is our square root. All right, I'm going to skip down a couple of these. Let's skip to 17 and 18. Yeah.
I have a question number 15.
Okay.
So I get a really long decimal whenever I do 16 divided by 80.
Okay, we got to be smart about 15. Let's do 15 together. 15 is a good one to do together. I bet you knew what to do first, though, right?
Yeah, so 981.
We're going to divide by 18. By 81 on 15. This is where we got to be smarter than our calculator, okay? So we're going to divide both sides by 81. That will cancel that out and moves the 81 over here. I am not going to plug down my calculator because my calculator gives out a decimal, right? Yes. So I'm going to leave it as 16 over 81. Stay with me here. What do I do to both sides?
You have to times it by 81.
I don't multiply it by 81. Remember, we're trying to get the n by itself. We're going to undo the square, which is square root. Don't worry about fractions. Just do all the stuff you would normally do. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And now I'm going to have n equals... Now we got to remember something about square roots from back in the day. When we take the square root of a fraction, we are taking the square root of the numerator and we're taking the square root of the denominator. So I'm going to rewrite this as the square root of 16 over the square root of 81. We did that when we first learned about square roots, that when we're doing fractions, I'm taking the square root of the top and the square root of the bottom. Now we do it individually. What's the square root of 16? I actually plug these individual things in my calculator. What's the square? It's 4. What's the square root of 81?
9.
9.
Okay, man, I just did
Our,
square root of 16 over 81.
you left it as a fraction?
Again, I gave you 4
Okay, good. But some of ours will give us a decimal. But we got to plug it in correctly, right? Because if I would have just did 16 divided by 81, I'd have a decimal and you did the square root of it, and it might screw up your calculator.
I got a decimal for number 10. But I got it 81 divided by 4. That's the homework.
For number 10? Oh, let's stay off the homework for right now. I can help us out on the homework in a second. I just want to get through this. I'm going to do 2 more with us, and then you're going to be responsible for the rest of it. What was it? Oh, how to get rid of the square? This one? How to get rid of the 2? Is that your question? Yeah. The square root and the square actually just cancel each other out. So you'll see a lot of times if you look up here, what we can do is we can actually show ourselves that by crossing out both of them. So that they undo each other, just like multiplication undoes division. Okay? Shh, 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 shh. Is it a question on the homework?
No, it's just a question.
Okay, yeah.
For the variable, would it be just a variable would it have this square?
Say that again?
For the variable, like the n squared, would it just be n or would it be n squared?
It would just be n because we got rid of the square because we took the square root of it. All of our answers would just be variable equals something. That's the whole point of taking the square root, so we can cross out that square. Okay, let's do 17 and 18 together. All right, so for 17, we're going to notice we have multiple things that we need to do. We have to know what to do first. We have a square, we have a multiply, and we have a subtracting 37. What do we do first? Do we deal with subtracting 37? Do we deal with the multiplication, or do we deal with the squaring first? Yes?
Adding.
We do adding and subtracting first. Can we all look up here? We do our adding and subtracting first. So I'm going to add 37 to both sides. That has to be our first move, is adding 37 to both sides. This is where it's really critical we do these things properly and we write them properly. All right, so that's going to now give me negative 4a squared equals, because that cancels out, is going to equal a negative 100. Yeah?
So we do negative 100 divided by minus 4 would equal 25.
Yeah, that is 100% correct, because now we have to deal, remember, we're trying to isolate that a squared. We're trying to get that a squared by itself. So we're going to divide both sides by a negative 4. The negative 4 and the negative 4 cancel out. And we move the negative 4 over here, which is going to now give me a squared equals a positive 25. Because a negative divided negative is a positive. Now we take the square root of 25 and we should get out 5. Now remember, when you take the square root of a squared, the square cancels out with the square root. So maybe getting a hang of crossing out both of these. Because our end answer should be regular old a equals plus or minus 5. All right, following the same ideas in the next one, we do our addition or subtraction first. So what's my first step? Raise your hand and tell me what the first step is for number 18. What was that? We're going to deal with the addition. What's the opposite of addition? Subtraction. So we're going to subtract 21 from both sides on this one. Move that minus 21 over here. We're going to now have w squared divided by 3 equals, and we're subtracting by 21, so that's going to be, what was that? 27. What's next? We're going to deal with the division. What's the opposite of division? So we're going to multiply both sides by 3. So we'll multiply this side by 3, showing that the 3's cancel out. Multiply this side by 3, which gives us 81.
81 squared is 81 and square root is 9.
So we have w squared equals 81. We take that square root of both sides, making sure we cancel out that square, right? So when I do the square root of both sides, the square and the square root cancel out. And we should have plus or minus 9. All right, all the ones I skipped, I want you to be working on those. If you already have them done, I can check them off to make sure they are correct. This is also a good time to answer homework questions if you have them, but we need this entire sheet all the way up to 20 finished. If you have it done, I'll check it off. You got 20 minutes to finish this if you don't get it done. What do we do with negatives? We're going to divide by a negative. That will make that one positive, and it's going to move the negative to the other side. Divide that one by a negative. That's going to make that one positive. You got it? Just a second. The rest of them. The ones we skipped. Leave them as fractions. Yes, we should have 4 over 9. Remember, leave them as fractions. We leave things as fractions. Do you have the stuff we skipped? Now you have to do all of it. Yep, because we went through a whole bunch of them together. Yes. Make sure you check your answers on the homework too. Do that on your phone, okay? Yeah, we're going to have to do something. We're going to have to figure out, because we're going to lose points every day that we miss this stuff.
I'm not saying we've done very well. Some math to show.
Okay, but we got 20 minutes to finish this and you haven't even started it. You know what I mean?